Okay. And perfect. Okay, so now we're live. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Spring 2021 Star Academy Research Presentations. The agenda for today is that we're going to have the welcome and presentation instructions from 8 to 8:15. From 8:15 to 8:35, we're going to have the first presentation titled Developing a Self-Sustainable Environment for Plants in the International Space Station. And then from there on, we're going to continue with some other presentations until 8:55, where we're going to take a short 15-minute break. We're scheduled to finish all the presentations by 10 a.m. And afterwards, after each presentation, we're going to be allowing a space for questions. So those of you who are watching us through YouTube Live, you can send questions through the live chat. Those of you who are here present on the Zoom meeting can send the questions through the chat. So the instructions have already been discussed with the students that are ready and eager to start presenting. So I think that we're ready to start with the first group. So for this project, we're going to have Alet Puchales Ruiz, Cristian Reyes Colón, Josué García, Leslian Vargas Rivera, and Joyce Colón, and Natalia Vélez Serrano. So group number one, let us know when you're ready to start presenting.
Well, good morning. My name is Leslian Vargas. I'm the leader of Group 1, and along with my teammates Natalia Vélez, Joyce Colón, Josué García, Cristian Reyes, and Ailet Puchales, we are going to be presenting our research project, which is called Developing a Self-Sustainable Environment for Plants in the International Space Station. Now we're going to start with Cristian.
Thanks, Leslian. Now, food aboard the International Space Station is pre-packed and requires frequent resupply deliveries on cargo spacecraft. Prepackaged food loses vitamins and nutritional value after 18 months. NASA is looking for new ways to provide astronauts with nutrients in a long-lasting form, such as freshly grown fruits and vegetables. We have created a space garden in which plants will grow in a dedicated module or cabin. The modular cabin will act as a self-sustainable environment where the plants can grow independently. Astronauts will have the opportunity to tend to the plants to ensure the proper growth of roots, make sure the plants are receiving enough water and artificial light, and report the result back to Earth. Now on our left, we have an image of an asparagus, a plant that we selected because it uses small space and has great nutritional value. And now the methodology with Joyce Colón.
Thank you. In the past several years, NASA has looked for different methods that can help with both health and an astronaut life for short or long-term space missions. Maintaining an astronaut well-being is one of the many factors that contribute to developing a safe mission to the ISS, Mars, or even beyond that. Some of these other factors are gravity, radiation, time, and environment. For astronauts to have a safe journey, a self-sustained environment has to be created. This artificial habitat will include both health and food through plants. How? The plants grown here will contain nutritious and medical properties. Studies have shown that the taking care of plants help reduce stress levels and enhance productiveness. In this article, we will provide an improved design for the ISS and how it benefits an astronauts. And in the table shown below is the needs of a plant on Earth and the ISS. On Earth, we need sunlight, carbon dioxide, pH between 5.5 and 6.5. So rich in nutrients, gravity, and in the ISS, we need lead light, sacs full of nutrients, citric acid white for cleaning and microbacteria, and water is inserted directly through its roots and microgravity. Now I leave.
Thank you, Joyce. Now I'm going to continue with the experiment. Throughout this experiment, we had a control group and an experimental group, where the control group was outdoors developing under the sun, and the experimental group was developing under an LED lamp, trying to recreate the plant growth aboard the ISS. Both groups in the experiment were assembled the same way, by having a DIY self-watering system. Both groups were also provided with 1 inch of water per week, which is the amount needed by chamomile plants. With this watering system, it was expected that the plant would absorb the amount necessary of water and preventing overwatering. As you can see in the image, we have the process of the assembly of the experiment. We used plastic water bottles to make the containers, and we used paper towels to make the water go from the bottom to the soil. We added 1 inch of water to the bottom container so that the plants could absorb during the time length of a week, and we added ground eggshells to recreate any nutrients added by astronauts aboard the ISS. As you can see, we have group 1 as a control group outdoors under the sun, and group 2 as an experimental group under the LED lamp. Now I'm gonna leave you with Josue Garcia with the results.
Thank you, Leslia. Although our plants did not grow after the tweak mark, we were still able to take information from other data, such as the growth and water consumption from the control group and the experiment group, and what our expectations were for the experiment. As you can see on the graph to the right, which has the water consumption between the control group, experimental group, and our expected results, they were quite similar. However, as you can see on the graph to the left, our germination in regards to our plants and the growth of them of our control group, experimental group, and the expected results were vastly different. We believe that with more time and microgravity, our plants will be able to grow in a self-sustained environment. Our plants will need fertilizer, sunlight, and a water system that would help them grow and is available in the International Space Station. This water system will be able to store and purify water in tubes that will recycle them once the plants consume and drain all the water. After researching various plants, we decided to go in a unique way and chose the asparagus and chamomile. These two types of herbs both work in unique ways to provide nutrition and help you maintain a healthy system. The asparagus can help our astronauts because it contains high fiber, maintains the digestive system stable, reduces the risk of cancer by radiation, can grow for over 10 years, and doesn't give you health problems by eating constantly. However, those who consume it may experience dry mouth because of their diuretic nature, can lead to sudden weight loss if you consume a greater amount of them. They do need a greater amount of water and can cause an excess in fiber. In regards to the chamomile, they can be stored in fresh containments without solar energy. They develop a partial shadow, help with gastrointestinal disorders that help astronauts pass to space, and is a medicinal plant that helps with anxiety, skin irritation from radiation, nausea, and is a stress reliever. The chamomile does need to have a constant source of water. It can cause a negative reaction if you mix it with different medical solutions. The tea components can cause internal bleeding if used excessively, and it may cause allergic reactions. And now I'll leave our presentation to Natasha.
Thank you. And so, as we all know, food is essential for the survival of astronauts in space. In the past few decades, scientists have been investigating the possibility of growing plants on the ISS, and they have succeeded. And much of our research is based on the success of past plant growth systems. However, we noticed that these plant growth systems could use a few improvements, and this led to us creating a space garden. And so on the right, you can see a digital representation that our group designed and I drew of our space garden. And you can also notice that in the drawing, chamomile and asparagus are present. As Josue mentioned, a few pros and cons of why we believe they should be grown on the ISS. However, I want to mention a few more. And at first glance, asparagus might not theme as the perfect plant to grow in space because of how long they take to fully grow and bloom. However, when they do grow, they provide a vast supply of food, and that is good for keeping the astronauts' diet. And so the other plant that we chose is chamomile. And a good thing about this plant is that if it dries up, it can still be used and made into a tea. And so these two plants could be essential to improving the diets of astronauts while also introducing the first medicinal plant on the ISS. I should also mention that we acknowledge that our DS still has room for improvement, but it's a big step on improving this current system that is used on the ISS. And so plants grow in space utilizing small areas that we can call plots, while controlled lighting, water, and fertilizers. In our proposal, we designed a complete module dedicated to the growth of plants. This module could be attached to the ISS, and hopefully, if it works, more plants could be introduced to our space garden. So if you observe our design on the right, the drawing, you can observe that our room is designed to grow an abundance of asparagus and chamomile to help maintain a surplus of these plants in an efficient manner. The room is circular in shape and has a glass wall on the end. The plants also have LED lights directly above each of their stations. And so the plants are also automatically giving water through Teflon hoses at regular intervals. And this water system will be filtered in tubes that can be recycled. And other materials that we included in our design are PVC, silicone, insulator wires, and aluminum. Then our conclusion, although our plants did not grow in the time frame that we expected, we still obtained valuable information on how to improve our experiment. We are still monitoring the plant's growth and recording their results. There are many reasons that could have caused this, such as time. It could also have been affected by the amount of water, light, and other materials that were administered directly from us. In the end, our experiment helped us determine the necessary materials and conditions for the development of a self-sustainable system. It also helped us select 2 plants that have never been planted on the ISS. As we previously mentioned, our self-sustainable system is designed as a module, and it is completely dedicated to the growth of plants. Since it's a module, it can be easily added to the ISS or to future spacecrafts. These are our references. I hope you enjoyed our presentation, and now we can answer any questions that any of you may have.
Excellent presentation, thank you. So now we're gonna open the space for questions. So those of you who are here on Zoom, feel free to raise your hand. And we're gonna give you a space so that you can ask directly your questions. Those of you who are on YouTube Live, feel free to write your questions on the chat and we'll direct them to the students. Lucas, you're sending me a message that you have a question, so you may go ahead and present it.
Hi. Just wonderful presentation, wonderful idea that you guys have brought up here. So my question to you is, in your experiment, you mentioned you used LEDs to measure the growth, right? As an experimental group, correct?
Yes, correct.
So what particular reason did you choose LED over, say, an incandescent light bulb or an ultraviolet light bulb? Why did you do that? I'm curious.
Well, in our research, we discovered that LED lights are used to help plants grow. And it was the most similar thing that I had available to use that was also used in the ISS. So it seemed like the best choice for the experiment.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, so I have some questions. So when you were talking about the design of the experiment, one of the things that you presented is with you use eggshells to represent the materials that the astronauts were going to use as nutrients, right? Why specifically eggshells?
Well, throughout this pandemic, I really tried to use what was available at home to create this experiment. And a thing that's pretty common in, in people that grow plants on their homes are eggshells. And it's something that really gives nutrients to the plant, so it would work.
Okay, excellent. And then that Viviana, you raised your hand for a second there. You have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. I wanted to ask if you considered any other plants to grow in your project, and why did you discard them?
That's a great question. We did have an array of different plants, but at the end we chose the ones that didn't take so much space and that didn't have long roots, because this is a module in space. And if you have big roots, it can affect the whole module and then affect the astronauts as a whole. And so we discarded plants like tomatoes, which grow in vines, and we discarded a lot of other plants that required a lot of water. But thank you.
We also discarded strawberries and potatoes because they also needed a lot of water, and that was the idea, to create a water system where we will recycle water, so that doesn't happen.
Okay, perfect. So I have two more questions. So the first one is, I noticed that in the graph that you presented, well, it was discussed also that the plants didn't grow in the 2 weeks that you ran the experiment for, right? How does this affect the validity of the results and your assumptions for this project?
Well, an experiment isn't really guaranteed to work, and this doesn't really affect the results that we have, since we can try again with different methods, since there are different variables that could have affected the growth of the seeds in the experiment. But we're still working on it, and we're continuing to monitor the experiment.
Perfect. Then that leads to my next question. Is there any plan to continue further developing the project?
Well, I think I can agree with all of my teammates that we really had fun with this experiment. And I think I'm planning on continuing to monitor the seeds to see if something sprouts. Because it really has been fun to, watch that all day, look at the changes that it has had, and wonder what are the reasons that what's happening is happening. And even wondering what could happen and why. It's really fun.
We all have our fingers crossed that they will grow soon.
Excellent, excellent. Well, any other questions from any of the other attendees? No questions then? All right. So perfect, excellent presentation. Congratulations. Okay. So now we're going to continue with our second presentation for the day. Now we have the team presenting the Selene lunar base. So we have Alana Cruz, Ariana Soto Crespo, Daniela Peña, Kenneth Arroyo Ruiz, Marcos Marcuxi Rodríguez, y Patricia Rivera. So once you're ready, let us know, and you may begin sharing your screen.
Good morning, this is Group 2, and we'll be presenting Selene, the lunar base. If humans have not studied the celestial object closest to them, how do they expect to reach beyond what they know? A base on the moon would act as a stepping stone for the progress of mankind, exciting the general public about the space industry and providing insight as to the conditions of other celestial bodies. In order to make this a reality, a plan for the construction of a lunar base that considers structural aspects and basic necessities would have to be developed. The structural aspect encompasses the location where the base will be built, the shape of the structure, and the materials that will be used in the construction process, as well as systems vital to make the base habitable. As for the basic necessities, methods for maintaining the overall health of the inhabitants will be developed. Systems for the production of food and water will be employed, and a database and laboratory will be integrated to the base, along with transportation and methods for the inhabitants. Now I'll leave you with Marcos with the structural aspects.
Thank you. The structural aspects of our base are location, structure, shape, method and material, energy source, oxygen source, air pressure system, temperature control, and radiation protection. What's the best location? After extensive research, we have concluded that we'll be located on Shackleton Crater. At first, we considered both two options, one being Marius Hill and the other being Shackleton Crater. Marius Hill being a place full of lava tubes caused by the lava flow that could be used as a type of cave system for the structure. But at the end, we chose Shackleton Crater. We chose it because it's a region of the moon with mountain peaks covering permanent sunlight, which will give astronauts easy access to solar energy. It also contains a permanent shadow containing ice that can be extracted that the astronauts can use. Now we'll leave you with Aria.
Aria. For energy production, we were considering solar energy and nuclear energy. At the end of the day, we decided solar energy would be cheaper and safer. And since the base would be located in the Shackleton crater, the risk of a nuclear reactor is really not worth it, since Shackleton crater receives permanent sunlight. Then for oxygen production, we were between hydrogen reduction of ilmenite, air distillation, and mining oxygen from the moon. Out of these three, we ended up choosing hydrogen reduction of ilmenite because, first of all, ilmenite is a very common resource on the moon. The process is composed by two easy steps, and the leftover hydrogen that is produced by the process can be reused. Air distillation was not considered because we will need to bring the air from the earth, and it really isn't viable. And mining oxygen from the moon is very similar to hydrogen reduction of ilmenite, but we ended up choosing ilmenite because the hydrogen can be reused. Con Patricia y Marco.
The methods and materials that we considered for constructing the base were using aluminum components transported from Earth to construct an initial base and then expanding it with molded regolith. The benefits of this method are that it requires few materials and they take up a small amount of space in the transport. However, the method depends on hand jacks and fiberglass tendons and pneumatic components, which could be damaged. And it also expands slowly.
The other method we considered was regolith concrete. It withstands extreme conditions and takes little time to produce. On the other hand, making the concrete is a long process, has a higher cost, and requires material from Earth that can be hazardous processed. So although it gives protection, it takes a lot of effort to make, and we'll have to bring extra materials from Earth.
Since ionizing radiation is a constant threat for the astronauts, it is crucial that we protect the base from it. The materials that we considered for shielding the base were lunar regolith and aluminum. We ended up choosing lunar regolith because it would be sourced directly on the moon, so it would have no cost and would end up saving a lot of money when shielding the entire base, although it requires a minimum thickness of 50 centimeters, which is approximately 10 times the thickness that would be required of aluminum.
Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the basic necessities of the inhabitants staying in our base. These include, but are not limited to, mental health and physical health, food and water, a database system, and a transportation system. First, let's talk about physical health. When it comes to physical health, we found that it's very important to stay in shape while being in space. This is because the gravitational pull is stronger on Earth than on the moon, meaning that our internal organs are used to that pull and needed in order to function properly. Given that, we'll be including a designated area for activities. Astronauts in orbit usually work out around 2 hours a day in order to stay in shape. This is because what was previously mentioned. To stay in shape, we'll be including 3 types of equipment that are used today in the International Space System. These are a treadmill, which you can see on the right, a stationary bike, and an ARED, which is basically a weightlifting system that is like the ones we use here on Earth. Now I'll leave you with Daniela.
First of all, I would like to say hi and good morning. I'm Daniela, and this part of my presentation on mental health, and is to maintain a healthy and happy brain. Humans usually like to do things that keep us feeling comfortable and cheerful. Meanwhile, in space, things can change a little. It won't be the same to ride a bike, read, cook, or do anything that keep us happy than it is on Earth. And it is because humans are exposed to a new living. That's why we came up with some fun and basic methods that can help our astronauts feel safe and focus on their mission. And all humans like to be happy and have a healthy brain. But let's talk space here. Most astronauts tend to react in different certain ways when they are whether isolated or on a mission or stuck on a mission with the same people. And the methods we chose to keep their healthy brain are 3: virtual reality, multiplayer games, and bugs. 3 methods: virtual reality for have fun and experience and not always be working, but only use them when they have free time. Virtual reality can also work for a distraction so that they don't fall into a certain level of stress where they can jeopardize the mission. Books, and I will also like to mention books as in not books on pages on paper. It can be, we chose the method of the Kindle version where they can keep their own device of Kindle and have their own downloaded books, and books for keeping their focus and be sure of what they have to do. Focus and concentration usually comes up with when you read. We can give them the idea to use the concentration they use while reading on the work they have to do on the base. Multiplayer games for socializing with other workers. They are gonna be stuck and they better have a good relationship. These multiplayer games can come installed with the virtual reality and not necessarily needed to be with Wi-Fi. The non-connection games was a very good method, and that's why we chose it.
When thinking about where we would get our food for everyone living in our base, we thought that the most vital option would be a sustainable planting system. In our case, this would be a hydroponic system. From what we found, you can basically take any type of food into space, but we also found a con to this, that it's very expensive to do so. So this option would help us a lot economically by not having to take up so many resources up in space. Another reason which this system can help us is by making us have the accessibility to have a varied, fresh, and healthy diet for those living in our base. Going into the water sources for our base, unfortunately, much information wasn't found. But we all know that water is one of the most important resources we humans need to survive. And looking into what it would take to bring water up into the moon, we found out that taking water into the moon not surprisingly, is very expensive. One of the reasons that we're establishing our base in Shackleton Crater in the south region of the moon is because we found that frozen water inhabits in that area, meaning we wouldn't have to take as much water. And lastly, to combat how much water we were taking to the moon, we decided that for obvious reasons, we would be recycling as much water as we can in order to reduce water usage and help us with cost.
For the research that the astronauts will be conducting, it's important that they have a database to store and access data. Although we couldn't find a lot of information as to what the database should include, we determined that at the very least, it should have lists of the spectral emissions of each element, manuals for operating and maintaining the equipment within the base, offline word processing and spreadsheet programs for easier data collection, safety protocols for different events while in the base, something for them to read at times when they're not busy, as it was mentioned in the mental health section, and medical records and documents of symptoms and cures of common ailments. Similarly, for the laboratory, there wasn't a lot of information, and the equipment in the laboratory will depend on the missions that the astronauts are assigned. However, the laboratory should be a sealed area with a mechanism to keep unwanted materials out. It should be kept sterile at all times. It should have ample workspace to prevent accidents. It should contain an area to store samples, especially samples that are very sensitive to temperature changes, for example. And in the laboratory should also have equipment like spectroscopes and microscopes.
In transportation, we chose the method of a magnetic train. This transportation method will become a regular part of living in a more futuristic life of our project. A method of transportation could make the lives of the humans to live safer, easier, and more comfortable. The individuals that will be staying on our lunar base will do research of the surface of the moon, and having this type of method of transportation will make it faster and simple so that they can gather data and samples. If our lunar base gets to start big on population, it will need to transport humans from certain parts of the moon. And I would like to say too that this method will only be used if our lunar base gets to be bigger. And if they grow in population, they're gonna have to need to build another base. And this method of the magnetic train can be easier so that they can transport humans from base to base. And why transportation? Astronauts need to move from base to base, as I said earlier, and a faster and new discoveries of the moon. They can get to certain parts of the moon with this magnetic train and just make this discoveries. This method is safer. And this we took the sample of the magnetic train of maglev train on China. Why? Well, it's attached to the railroad and it's not like a normal train with a normal railroad with the wheels and all that. If we built this train, it could probably fly off. The train with a certain speed. We don't want that to happen. One of the best benefits of this method is that they are both safe and attached to the railroad. One of the biggest benefits is that the magnetic trains usually don't need fuel. They are cleaner and they have smoother rides. And the length of riding will be over to 30 to 50 minutes. But obviously, if it's on the moon is smaller than Earth. And it could actually take up to 30 to 40 minutes. It actually depends too.
Taking into consideration all the different problems building a lunar colony would encompass, we were able to successfully study the topics we wanted to. Overall, the general requirements for a lunar structure were discussed. The benefits brought up by the inclusion of all these different problems and topics of this project were to make it a reliable source of future study, backup of previous knowledge, and possibly discover new innovative ways to build a lunar base. The universe is large and unknown. If NASA reaches the success of building up and perfecting a lunar base, scientists would be one step closer to the colonization of Mars and investigating the mystery that is the universe. Furthermore, the moon may preserve clues as to the origins of Earth. Above all, the moon may have some unknown benefits that could help the advancement of modern technology and future discoveries. Projects like these are very important for space exploration. A lunar base would have many benefits over a variety of things. Since the moon has less gravity, a rocket would launch would cost less fuel, making it the perfect place to launch to other destinations. It could be the starting point to study and see the effects of long-term interplanetary settlements. From there on, we can move on to places like Mars and beyond. Lastly, we would like to thank the Arecibo Observatory for providing us with the mentors and opportunities to learn and grow as individuals, enabling us to gain immense amounts of knowledge. Special thanks to Dr. Lauren Pambagian, Professor Bradley Rivera, Professor Christian Mercado, and Professor Jasmine Santiago. Also, lots of appreciation to the people that gave the extra mile in the process of developing this project. Thank you for your attention. And these are our references.
Excellent presentation, thank you. Okay. So I noticed that at the beginning of the presentation, there was a slide that was skipped related to the structure. I think that this was due to one of the team members not being present at the moment, right? However, can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
Okay, please share the screen again. Let's go back to the slide because I'm really interested in knowing a little bit more about the structure. So I think that Ariana is here with us. So Ariana, if you may talk to us a little bit more about the structure of the Selene lunar base.
Well, for the structure of the lunar base, we decided to go with the Apollo Logistics Support System and Lunar Exploration Systems for Apollo, which is translated into the LISA, which we found that it was the closest concept for a permanent lunar base. The benefits of building this base and perfecting it would include beginning to space technology, evaluation, and use of lunar resources, and a long-range use of the moon. And next to the text, we have an image of what we found could be like a closest concept of the interior and of how it would overall look.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's see. Now we're gonna open then the space for questions. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Let's see, I have someone here.
Hi, I have a question. First of all, my presentation. My question is, humans need both a quantity of oxygen and nitrogen to survive because pure oxygen is toxic to humans. You have an oxygen system. Do you also have a nitrogen system that is incorporated into the habitat?
No, we do not have one.
Actually, there was a part of the project that we considered pressure control. And in that system, it included something to blend different gases and make a mix of the gases in order to maintain a stable atmosphere for the astronauts to breathe.
Okay, thank you.
Viviana, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to ask, you mentioned you were gonna use regolith, lunar regolith as a material for your structure, I believe. How are you gonna construct that? Like, how are you gonna use that material? Are you gonna use in situ resource utilization to produce the material itself, or are you just gonna use the material as it is? Because I don't know much about the material and I don't know if it's a rock or...
Yeah, so the lunar regolith is basically the equivalent of dirt on the moon, but it has different properties. And with the method that we studied, we would basically be compressing the regolith into the shape that we need it. And we would be placing it with the pneumatic components that we mentioned. So the pneumatic components would hold the regolith in place while it's being attached, and then it would be uninflated.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So any other questions? for many of the attendees. Those of you who are watching us on YouTube Live, you may send any questions that you might have through the live chat, any comments from the students, and we'll direct them to the team. It's not that I have some questions. Okay, so mental health issues, right, are certainly important, and they need to be considered when designing this type of mission. So I'm curious if there is any research that supports these choices that you made to tackle this important problem. I know that you chose virtual reality as a way to cope with isolation and other things, right? Is there any research that supports your decision?
Yeah, I would like to say that by looking further into this, we found that even the same astronauts that have been in the ISS talk about this super frequently, that being in such an enclosed climate, they have to find ways to entertain themselves because we're just humans. Even if we're up in space, no matter how far we are, we're just humans. And we're also communicate beings, right? So in order to function properly, we also need that personal space. And we didn't mention the interview, but when we interviewed Dr. Lawrence, when we asked him what he would bring up into space, he said a guitar, and we all were in shock, like, why a guitar? But he gave us the explanation of saying that he needs that in order to relax. And using that personal information from reliable sources, we decided to that conclusion.
Excellent. So we have a question here in the chat from Isis. She's asking, how do you plan to get rid of carbon dioxide? I suspect that she means like carbon dioxide inside the structure itself. Is there any mechanism that is going to help, or is it being considered right now?
We actually didn't consider that, so thank you for bringing it up. That's something we can improve on. As of the moment, the best thing that we would have would be the plants from the food system. But that's basically all we have for the carbon dioxide.
Okay, perfect. So I have another question. So your project includes many aspects of it, like from a standalone lunar base, a transfer system, and so on, right? So is there any timeline that was developed for the construction or implementation of these systems?
No, we didn't develop a timeline for this.
But do you think that it will be necessary to do so?
Definitely, if we're going to take this and form a well-made proposal to bring to the space agencies, then yes, we would definitely have to consider the timeline. But as of the moment, we really wanted to focus on what choices would be the best to make a good structure.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. So we have a question from Jasmine. She's saying, you said that it was very expensive to bring water to the moon. Why is it?
Yeah, it all depends on the amount of water, because you take a cup of water, right? It's not really heavy. But when you start putting a lot of water, it's going to be very, very heavy. And the amount of water that would need for those living in our base would be an extreme amount of water. And taking that up in one trip is not possible. So we would have to make multiple trips, and we all know that trips to the moon are not cheap. So yeah, not only water, basically all materials are super expensive, right? When developing our project, at first we were expecting to calculate the cost of the whole base, but knowing how products change in price, we weren't able to do that.
Excellent. So this is another reason why it's important to establish that timeline, right? So making sure that the resources get there at the right time when they're going to be implemented. Okay, or needed. So just like I asked the other question, the same question to the other team, is there any plan to continue working on this project, or what's the long-term goal?
We didn't really discuss this, but personally, I think I would like to keep researching on the subject because I really found it a very interesting project. And there were a lot of things that I didn't expect to have to learn and understand about when we began the project. But as we were going, more and more problems were surfacing that we had to consider in order to continue planning the structure.
Excellent. And there's one last question on the chat from Isis, and she's asking what criteria were used to compare and contrast the different variables. So you can talk to us about one specific area of the lunar base, since it has so many systems and so on. So talk to us about one of them, and how did you decide? For example, it could be materials and so on.
Well, when we were working on the materials to build the base and the method, there was actually a third method that we were considering, but we had to eliminate it completely because there were a lot of unknowns for the method. It consisted of taking a robot to the moon and having the robot construct the base by 3D printing it using the regolith as a printing material. But to use the regolith as a printing material, it needed binding materials like salts and other things, and we didn't really know. So that's the initial reason why we contacted Dr. Laurent and Megan. And when we were talking to him and interviewing him, he also said that they don't know what robot to use for that. They don't really have a robot developed, and that there were many methods of turning the regolith into a printing material that they still had to be studied. So for example, that's one way that we eliminated a material. And we also tried to go with a cost that wasn't too high, but the material was also very effective. So those were the main criteria.
Excellent, perfect. Okay, so thank you, excellent presentation. Okay, so that concludes our second presentation for the day. Now we're gonna take a 15-minute break, and we're going to be back at 9:10 for our third presentation. And this time we're gonna have the design of a sustainable Martian habitat with Andrea Chilla, Isis Reverón, Jorge Crespo, Chiara Martí, Rial Garcia, and Viviana Betts. So in the meantime, we're gonna take a 15-minute break. Okay, see you then. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue now with the second round of presentations for the day. Now we're going to start with group 3, who's going to be talking to us about their project titled Design of a Sustainable Martian Habitat. The group members are Andrea Arcilla, Isis Reverón, Jorge Crespo, Chiara Martí, Rial Garcia, and Viviana Vélez. So whenever you're ready, let us know and you may begin presenting. Perfect, we can see the presentation. Go ahead.
Good morning to all. We're group 3, and today we'll be presenting our investigation project, whose purpose was to design a sustainable Martian habitat. What did our project seek to achieve? What were our findings? Without further ado, I leave you with my teammate Chiara, who will be giving you a brief summary of what our project consisted of.
Thank you, Viviana. So, over the years, NASA and multiple organizations worldwide have made an effort to learn about Mars, and many have wondered if we could establish a place on its surface where humans can survive for a long period of time. We sought to develop a habitat that considers the most important factors. For example, the materials it will be composed of, the power sources it will use, and the oxygen system that will produce purified oxygen for the crew. This was the purpose of our research project, to propose a Mars habitat that takes into account the most important factors for sustainability. This will open new doors for exploration of the red planet and the experience of living somewhere else than Earth. The information used for our project was gathered by conducting deep research for each of the factors mentioned. For this, we use scientific articles, trusted sources, and the activity of contacting professionals specialized on topics that correspond to our project's purposes. We believe that these components together address all the major challenges that our habitat will need to be successful. Now, how did we analyze the data obtained? My teammate Isis Reverón will explain the process.
Thank you. For this habitat, we took a multi-method research approach. For example, we used a combination of both qualitative and quantitative methods, as well as a comparative research approach to compare and contrast the different variables that create the habitat. Also, the classification approach that helped us define what worked best to maximize the usage of each of the properties together and how the structure of the layers of the habitat will be made of. The clear example of the qualitative and comparative research are these tables. Here we can demonstrate clear how we made these. We use general facts, reasons why it should be discarded, and advantages for the materials, power source, batteries, and oxygen charts. In other parts of the presentation, we go more in depth of these. The information obtained was extracted from trusted sources like scientifically approved papers and professionals in the area we contacted. The quantifications are seen in another part of this presentation where we also present the results of what we chose as the best variables for this habitat. With this being said, my teammate Viviana can further explain these.
Thank you, Isis. Through the methodological approach we took in our investigation project and the data analysis we conducted, we were able to find the most optimum location, the best materials, technologies, and systems, as well as the most beneficial power source and oxygen system to incorporate into our design. The habitat itself seems to work as a whole and comply with all factors taken into consideration at the beginning of the investigation project. The structure is able to be categorized as sustainable and overall safe to inhabit. Now I'll leave you with my teammate Andrea, which will be giving the results of the materials and structure design.
Yes, thank you, Viviana. Our structure design was divided into 3 main parts: an outer structure, interior skeleton, and floor or base to ensure the efficiency in our final product. Harmful rays on Mars may cause fatal health issues, so for maximum protection, our outer structure will have 2 layers. The first layer will be made of Kevlar, covered in a boron nitride nanotubes coating, also known as BNNTs. And for its top layer, a combination of 3D printed BNNTs and high-density polyethylene will be used. BNNTs are essentially a material with extreme radiation resistance. They ensure most possible protection and can be made into pretty much anything, which is why we incorporated it into all of our structure. Our interior skeleton will be composed of stainless steel, as well for the unions or pathways connecting our domes. Same as Kevlar, these will also be coated. Finally, our floor will be composed of 3D printed piezoelectric BNNTs. With these, we were able to provide an even surface and protect humans from the harmful components on Mars' surface. Most of the information in this segment was provided by Doctora Sierra Sastre, who guided us in the science of textiles. Using all of these, we were able to create a safe and sturdy structure, which we are very proud of. I'll now leave you with my teammate Viviana, who will explain how we opted to incorporate an oxygen system into our design.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, to incorporate oxygen into our design, we decided a solid oxide electrolysis and high temperature co-electrolysis resulted as the most beneficial and reliable option. The system itself is based in the Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment, MOXIE, which utilizes ISRU to produce fuel and oxygen out of the Martian atmosphere. The way this works is that it takes the carbon dioxide of the Martian atmosphere and through heat and electricity, it separates it into carbon monoxide and oxygen, which with the use of a carbon monoxide scrubber, we will be able to obtain just the oxygen we need for the astronauts. However, oxygen alone is toxic to humans, and so we needed to find a way to incorporate nitrogen into our design. For this, we utilized the NORS, Nitrogen Oxygen Recharge System, from the International Space Station. We utilized the nitrogen tubes that we plugged into the already discussed MOXIE model to produce breathable air for the astronauts. We also incorporated a CO2 carbon dioxide scrubber into the dome itself because, as we all know, us human beings produce and generate naturally carbon dioxide through the exhalation process. And so we needed to find a way to take the carbon dioxide out of the habitat itself. Through a CO2 scrubber, we were able to achieve this. Now I'll proceed to explain the quantifications of MOXIE. To quantify MOXIE, we used information that was provided to us by Oxy & Company, which worked with the MOXIE model. And said by NASA, an average human needs 0.84 kilograms of oxygen per day to be sustained. However, the MOXIE experiment only produces 10 grams of oxygen per hour, which means MOXIE needs to be used in its scale in order to work its purpose. When quantified, MOXIE needs to be 24 times its size in order to sustain the life of a 6-member crew. However, the final product resulted in a really large scale, so we decided to divide it into 4 equal smaller systems. Finally, when calculated, each of the systems will be of 4.7 times 4.7 times 6.1 feet approximately, and we would have an overall production of 5,760 grams of oxygen per hour, enough to sustain the life of 6.86 average humans. Now I'll leave you with my teammate Jorge, which will be giving the results of the power source.
Thank you, Viviana. Choosing the right power source for a sustainable Martian habitat was a critical part in our investigation, and quite frankly, one of the most hardest parts of our research because of all the variables that we're taking into consideration. And after evaluating multiple power sources, as a team, we decided that solar power would serve us best, and it was the best fit for a sustainable Martian habitat. Throughout the use of solar panels and lithium-ion battery system, the goals of our design will be achieved. The battery system selected is great because it has no type of memory, which discards the need for maintenance. Also, this type of battery presents no harm to humans and has been treated in the International Space Station, resulting in an outstanding work. They also have a moderate discharge, which contributes to a large storage of energy. As a team, we concluded that with the use of self-dusting system and lithium-ion batteries, we were able to sort out all the problems taken into consideration. And the variables that were encountered throughout the way, like global sandstorms, temperature variation, and the amount of sunlight that entered the surface. Thanks to this design, our habitat resulted in success. Now I'm going to leave you with my teammate Rayal, who is going to explain the quantifications of power sources for the oxygen systems.
Thank you, Jorge. Our power source will be composed of 70 monocrystalline solar panels of 550 watts. Our dome with the MOXIE would need around 38.4 kilowatts hour, and the MOXIE needs around 8.4 kilowatts hour, or meaning of a total of 15 solar panels. This energy will be stored in 3 Tesla batteries of 13.5 kilowatt hour, and we would be able to store around 40.5 kilowatt hour.
Now, what better way to demonstrate our achievements than through a full visualization of our habitat design? I'll leave you with my teammate Andrea, who will be giving you a full tour of our Martian habitat structure design, Meraki.
I agree, which is why Project Meraki was created. Meraki serves as a visual representation of what our investigation project proposes. For context, its name is Greek and serves as means to do something with soul, creativity, or love. To put something of yourself into your work. We thought it was perfectly fitting as it took many hours of hard work and dedication, but it was all worth it. I present to you Project Meraki. Here we're seeing a view of the complete structure along with its components. This is a 4D model of what our main dome would look like.
We can't see the screen that you're sharing. We can see a pass-through manager.
Oh, I apologize.
No, don't worry. It's okay.
It's all right, Ryle. I believe Ryle can present the images. As soon as he presents them, Andrea can keep up.
Can we see it now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Here we're seeing a complete view of the structure along with its components. This is a 4D model of what our main dome would look like. However, the complete Meraki habitat is made up of 5 of these 3D domes. Each consists of 6 main parts, which are its base, inner skeleton, outer layer, unions connecting the domes, solar panels, and oxygen unit, also known as MOXIE. This is merely an overview, and in an instant, I'll be explaining everything in further detail. We can start by looking at our stainless steel unions. These are rigid and cylindrical in appearance and serve as pathways. At the sides, these connect all our domes. In the model, our unions are open, but each of these will be closed at either end to avoid cross-contamination. The back union leads to solar panels, allowing for the crewmates to tend these when necessary. As this is our main dome, it has 1 extra union at front. This acts as our entrance and exit. Continuing with our solar panels, these are our main source of energy, combined with the Li-ion battery for storage. These also have a self-dusting system where when dust levels are sensed as critical, it will send an electric shock repelling all dust from its surface. Together, this increases its effectivity by quite a lot. Now, as for interior skeleton, for a model, a welded steel material was used. However, for a habitat, a stainless steel material is planned to be used. Its shape was chosen on the basis of its resistance to many different factors. In fact, a geodesic dome-shaped structure is said to be one of the safest. Not far along is our simulated 3D piezoelectric floor or base. This is meant to even out our floor and protect our crewmates. Covering our interior skeleton is our outer structure for radiation. Mars does not have an atmosphere, meaning radiation enters freely. Therefore, a synthetic protective layer would have to be created. This first layer we see is meant to be Kevlar. It is white in color to help with temperature control. Dark colors are known to absorb light and lighter colors are known to reflect it, which is exactly what we need. Even though only the Kevlar layer was shown in our model, a 3D printed BNNT layer will be added. BNNTs can be manipulated into any kind of material, which is why it's going to be made in a sort of gel coating and is going to be spread on all of the stainless steel pieces as well as the Kevlar to ensure protection over the humans and materials. Finally, we have our miniature MOXIE unit. While it could have been one whole giant unit, we decided to divide it into 4 smaller machines. This makes the units way more accessible. Also, if one were to break, we had the chance to fix it while still producing enough oxygen. Whereas if we had only one big unit and it broke, it would be a complete crisis. In addition, these machines were equipped with different machinery that ensures breathable air, as previously mentioned by my teammate Viviana. This concludes our virtual tour of our Meraki habitat. I'll leave you with Jorge, who is going to present our conclusion.
Thank you, Andrea. Based on the research and data, we concluded that factors such as Mars atmospheric conditions, surface, and other independent variables are important to consider when designing a sustainable Martian habitat. Results indicate that with the use of specific materials and various technologies, a sustainable Martian habitat that assures the safety of the crew can be achieved.
Some variables could affect our habitat's purpose, like Martian's global sandstorms and temperature variations. However, we were able to find new insights on what materials and power sources to use on our design.
Even though we succeeded in complying with the objective being considered, the research itself raised questions such as, can the whole structure be constructed in the Martian surface? And is there a way to protect the astronauts themselves from radiation for another way that is in the habitat or special suit? Further research is needed to determine the answer to this question.
The first instant objectives of our investigation project were achieved through a geodesic dome-shaped structure divided into 3 main parts, constructed with several study materials and 3D printed technology. The incorporation of solar power system that uses monocrystalline solar panels, as well as light-on batteries and an ISRU, COEC, HTCE, and Norse oxygen system, with the addition of both a CO2 and CO scrubber, the most suitable Martian habitat will be obtained. Our findings prove that through the use of correct technology and materials, manned missions to Mars can be achieved. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation. Excellent, excellent, excellent. One thing that I wanted to say, I wanted to congratulate all of you because the teamwork was evident. So the way that you organize a presentation and the way that you work on the project is representative of what teamwork really is. So congratulations for that. Okay, so now we're going to open the space for questions. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Anyone that is watching us on YouTube, you can send your comments or your questions through the live chat. Those of you who are here, you may raise your hand.
Happy to answer.
I loved your presentation and the whole idea. It was very amazing. And I wanted to ask that why did you choose a circular shape instead of, I don't know, a triangle, rectangle for the Mars base?
Yes, awesome question. So as we said in the presentation, I believe, but we didn't emphasize as much, a geodesic dome-shaped structure, it withstands powerful winds, it supports earthquakes better, it is better for climate control. It also shows to have a larger volume, which helps astronauts think that they are in a bigger space. And so it also helps with mental health. And yeah, when we were researching different shapes, well, it showed to be the best for those benefits and much other reasons.
This information was brought up by Jahaira, a doctor that also studied in a habitat and was in a simulation of such. So it was pretty valid. And she also talked about how, thanks to gravity, it's better to be close to the surface.
Excellent, perfect. Okay, so any other questions? We have a comment from Ms. Crespo. Real, I think that Ms. Crespo is your teacher, right? So she's congratulating the team on the presentation. Excellent presentation, she says. Okay.
Any other question?
Don't worry. Arielis, go ahead.
Okay, excellent presentation. I don't know if you mentioned it, but you did an estimation of the cost?
We didn't.
We obviously took all these things into consideration, but that wasn't exactly what our project was centered on. We were centered on what the compositions of the materials, the oxygen system, all of those things. The cost wasn't really that important in what we were trying to achieve in our project.
Yes, I wanted to add, I wasn't able to hear the question, but I believe it was about the cost. Yes?
Yes.
So yeah, we didn't take that into consideration. However, For a fact, we know that BNNT is not quite a lightweight or cost-effective material. However, since it's such a good radiation shield, less of the material needs to be used for the habitat design, and for such reasons, it lowers the price.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I had a direct message from Kenneth Arroyo. Most of his question was answered by Viviana, but the location of the base is a place called Mariner Valley. It's a canyon in Mars near to the equator. It's actually way bigger than the Grand Canyon on the US. And we chose that location because it's near the equator. So it's one of the hottest parts of Mars, and it will help with the energy.
Excellent. Sophia.
Viviana mentioned something to Joania about the mental health. I was wondering if she could explain that a little bit more, because I'm a little bit interested in that part.
Yes, of course. Well, I was talking about the shape of our dome. It's a geodesic dome, and even though our habitat didn't specialize in looking at mental health as one of the most important factors into considering, we did cover that aspect in terms of finding a habitat that seems bigger. It has a bigger volume when you look at a geodesic dome through the inside. And so that helps the astronaut into thinking that he is not like encased in a small space.
Thank you. And I also wanted to congratulate you guys, because it was an excellent presentation and very interesting topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was really an adventure for us. We learned a lot and we definitely enjoyed it. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So we also have another message from Angela Perez on YouTube. She's saying excellent work in time management. Congratulations to both the organizers and the students. Okay, so perfect. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. We're going to continue with the next team. Up next, we have the project titled Exploring the Possibility of Life in Enceladus. And the students who are going to be presenting are Abdiel Sanchez, Aulani Rivas, Atenas Berrios, Joan Graniela, and Lucas Baez. So team, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Yes, can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Well, greetings everyone. My name is John, and today I have the honor of presenting Group 4 Research Project. This was a team effort by Lucas Baez, Atenas Berrios, Aulani Rivas, Abdiel Sanchez, and myself, Joan Graniela. Today, we will be presenting our work on exploring the possibility of life in Enceladus. I'm sorry for that. The slides are not passing. I think we're having some technical issues down the slides. Oh, perfect. Here we go. Okay, so Saturn holds a natural satellite called Enceladus, which hides a global ocean of liquid salty water beneath its crust. This causes a substantial interest from mankind. And of course, it is our nature to explore, and the best way to prepare for future space exploration is to research the possible outcomes and be prepared to face them. Understanding whether life exists elsewhere in the universe beyond Earth is the main question and the most complex. From our understanding, the first step should be identifying what are the components that will make life possible. Then understand what conditions do Enceladus have, and especially what microorganisms will possibly be able to undergo such conditions. And 3 microorganisms were chosen to be evaluated and their characteristics. They will be tardigrades, brine shrimps, and methane worms. Now I will leave the presentation to Lucas.
So as a means of introduction, Enceladus is a satellite from the planet of Saturn. It is interesting and has been widely accepted as one of the possible candidates for life outside our home, Mother Earth. Enceladus embraces several conditions that potentially indicate signs of life, from the presence of oceans and even the findings of organic compounds such as methane in Enceladus. Next slide, please. So this project was split into two main stages to verify the following hypothesis. If there is a microorganism that can adapt to the conditions of Enceladus, and also if the satellite presents the minimal requirements for the presence of life, then the presence of life is possible. The first half would be to compare the environmental and chemical aspects of Enceladus to that of Earth, one that we know is capable of life. And the second half is seeking said organisms that could potentially serve as candidates to survive the conditions of Enceladus, with all of this following one goal to answer the question, is there the possibility of the presence of life in Enceladus? Next slide, please. So this research project seeks to answer three questions, which are, could microorganisms exist in Enceladus? What are the components of Enceladus that make life possible? And finally, what microorganisms would be more likely to survive in Enceladus? Next slide, please. So what's the chemical composition of Enceladus? Well, our main source of data, the Cassini spacecraft, made the discovery that this satellite presents an atmosphere that is comprised mainly of water vapors alongside nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and methane. And it also presents a weak gravitational field. This atmosphere is thought to have been caused by volcanism, geysers, and/or gases that originate from the surface or the interior. The surface of the satellite is composed mostly of a thick ice crust that is smooth and does not exhibit many craters, making it the most reflective celestial body in our solar system. Enceladus's tiger stripes have provided proof that the moon contains a variety of organic molecules, salts, ice fragments, methane, and water vapor, which are believed to originate from the crust. And now I will leave it to Aunani to explain the environment of Enceladus.
Thank you, Lucas. Well, firstly, good morning to professors and classmates. I will be talking about what the environment is like on Enceladus. Well, Enceladus is a saltwater ocean located under a thick crust of ice and it spreads out water into space from the South Pole. Since it possesses a thick crust, the oceans are likely particularly dark since light can't get through and are neither a peaceful place. As it travels around Saturn, the oceans are shut around. It is probable that the oceans have hydrothermal vents spewing out mineral-rich water through them, and they create hot areas on the seafloor heated by magma. However, Enceladus' ocean is still an unexplored body. Next slide, please. Now, is there an example here on Mother Earth of life that could survive on Enceladus' hard conditions? Well, as previously stated, this final phase of the experiment cannot be reached as we need data from the climate to determine the type of organisms that could possibly survive the conditions of Enceladus, and we're mainly focusing on the microbial life. This will be achieved through already existing studies, such as one from the literary revision of bacteria and the researchers of other organisms that could withstand such conditions. This is important as if we find a living organism that could withstand said conditions of Enceladus, then there most likely is a possibility of life. However, if there is not the presence of this organism, then it is not possible for life as we know it on Earth to be living on the satellite. If all three of these stages come out positive, then there is a probability of existing life on the satellite. Now to my teammate Abdiel with the next slide.
Thank you. So our limitations on conducting the experiment was that Enceladus is farther than Mars, so it's more than 1 billion kilometers away. So we can't send teams of astronauts or rovers to analyze data and come back with samples. The only information we can get is from the satellite Cassini and telescopes from Earth. Next slide. The data we have from Enceladus is that it's around 504.2 kilometers, but it's 504.2 kilometers with a global salty ocean under a sheet of ice, making it the most reflective body in our solar system. This is why it's considered the most interesting scientifically destinations to study. Components found multiple traces and including large and small organic molecules, many theories suggest that the fumes of water vapor possess the ideal potential to host extraterrestrial life. Comparing Enceladus with Earth, Earth is 510.1 million kilometers, and it is the only place we know that has life. The satellite possesses many different geological structures. The northern region of the Enceladus, it's more cratered and rougher than the south region that has a smoother surface. And in this southern region, there are fumes of water vapor that escape from active geothermal activity. It is called cryovolcanism, that are eruptions happening in the southern outer layer of the core. Although it's not burning lava, it is extremely hot water.
For life to be possible in Enceladus, it must hold the minimum requirements for life, and these are liquid water, an energy source, and the correct chemical ingredients. Enceladus has tectonic processes that make possible the liquid water beneath its crust and the plume. All of this might be enough just to sustain life that will create a geochemical cycle. Next slide. Since we are exploring the possible microorganisms that could survive the such conditions of Enceladus, a great example is the extremophiles. These are deep, they live in deep dark oceans in hydrothermal vents, and they can resist high and low extreme temperatures in a chemical environment. Multiple biologists have studied and suggested that this similar microorganism could possibly survive the conditions of Enceladus. The three microorganisms that we have evaluated are the tardigrades, the methane ice worms, and the brain shrimps. The tardigrades, also called water bears, only need a small amount of water to survive and an energy source. The next one is methane ice worms. These are 2-inch long worms that only need methane ice and water to survive. And lastly, the brain shrimps can survive a high concentrations of salt water and high and low extreme temperatures. And now I'll leave you with Alanis that will discuss the results.
Thank you, Athena. Now on to the results and discussion. As we can observe on the screen, we created a visual representation comparing the conditions and properties between Enceladus and Earth based on the data we have collected. As we can see, they share few things in common, but like previously mentioned. But this was mainly created so that we could discuss that even though they are very different from one another, microorganisms could potentially find this environment as a great habitat to live on. Now on to the next slide with Athena.
This table is a comparison of the conditions we know of Enceladus and all the data we gather of these three microorganisms. Now, we can see that the tardigrades and the methane ice worms could survive 100% the conditions that we know, but the brain shrimps only can survive a 90%. Although they can survive a 90%, they are still perfect candidates for possible life in Enceladus. It's very important to remember that these are not the only microorganisms that can survive these conditions of Enceladus. And now I'll leave you with Joan that will explain our outreach.
Thank you, Atenas. Well, we are interested in making the community part of our research, and for that we made an outreach survey. We gathered 161 responses where the general public answered 3 specific questions related to the possibility of life in Enceladus. In every section, we added facts and informative data that could give the volunteers a better understanding of this moon, its characteristics, and the 3 microorganisms we are evaluating in this investigation. The first question was, do you think life could exist on Enceladus? Of course, referring to microorganism life, where 90% of people marked that yes, it could be possible, as you can see. The second question was, do you think these microorganisms could survive on Enceladus? Referring to the 3 microorganisms previously presented, where 70% of the responses were that there's possibility of this being possible, and the other 27% needed to know more information about this moon. The third question was, would you like to know more about Enceladus? And 95% of people want to know more and they are interested in this topic. As we can see in the results of each part, they were consistent, and the community wants to learn more about this exciting celestial body. They want to explore the possibility of life in it, but due to the insufficient information it exists, our options are very limited. Taking these responses into consideration, we encourage space exploration, especially the exploration of Enceladus, its components, the physical properties of its surface, especially the tiger stripes, and the related extents. Now, I will leave the conclusion to Lucas.
So the conclusion we as a team reached is that throughout this investigation, we have reached the conclusion that the possibility of the presence of life in Enceladus is, as a matter of fact, possible. Enceladus sure is a more harsh environment than our home planet Earth. However, it still meets the minimal conditions to be considered as a possible candidate for interstellar life, both chemically and environmentally. We can see 2 of the 3 organisms, specifically the tardigrades and methane worms, meet all conditions. Brine shrimps, on the other hand, are the only one of the 3 that don't meet all the conditions, however, are still excellent candidates for life on Enceladus. Enceladus requires more scrutiny, as it is one of the strongest candidates for the presence of extraterrestrial life. We as a research team unanimously agree that more missions to the satellite and other celestial bodies of its kind should be conducted. As we have paid a lot of attention to bodies already studied, we, as mankind, need to expand our knowledge and understanding of the universe far beyond the orbit of Mars and into the unknown. As mankind was born to challenge big endeavors and success on the challenge to hopefully one day reach an Atlantis of life in an external world. And for a final word, I'll leave it back to Joanne.
Thank you. Well, here we present the references that were used to compose our work. And to finalize, we would like to show our appreciation and gratitude to everyone that made this possible, starting with the Star Academy, the Arecibo Observatory, UFC, Ana Jiménez University, NASA, our mentors, and all of you that took the time today to attend our presentation and support science and space research. Now, we will gladly answer your questions.
Excellent presentation, thank you. So we have a few comments from YouTube Live. So we have Giselle that is saying that this is excellent presentation. We have Bobby Vélez who is saying muchas felicitaciones a todos estos jóvenes que están interesados en las ciencias, mirando hacia el futuro. A todos mucho éxito en sus vidas, en especial a Patricia Rivera. Ahora sí, vamos a continuar. Let's continue with the questions. So we have Alana is writing in the chat. She's saying, could you guys talk more about why is it the most reflective body on our solar system? I didn't know that and thought that it was very interesting.
Well, thank you, Alana, for your question. It is the most reflecting body of the solar system because it's an icy body. It's like water, but frozen the whole celestial body. So it's amazing. I think it's very interesting too, because it is a moon from Saturn. It is very far away, but it's still the most reflective body. And I think that's very interesting, and I am happy that you brought up that. Thank you.
Also, the color is color white, so white reflects most light, so makes sense, kind of.
So, Abdiel, what you're referring to is the electromagnetic spectrum, right?
Yes, I was.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So, any other questions from any of the attendees? No questions? Viviana, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to know why you chose those exact extremophiles or microorganisms out of so many that exist, as you said.
we chose these three microorganisms because they were the most information we could gather from. We know that there are multiple microorganisms that can adapt to these conditions, but we chose these ones because they were the most data we could gather. And based on their descriptions, we wanted to know if they could survive. And we got the results that they can survive.
Another add-on, another thing about these organisms is the fact they're very resilient on themselves. And another thing is that we could get a lot of data. And we chose these particularly because of memories that we've had. For example, I, once in 9th grade, did a project on tardigrades. So it was just the first one that came to mind because we already had data on them. So we could just reuse it again. So that's why we picked them.
Excellent. So now we have Erielis.
Wow, excellent presentation. Okay, due to the results of the outreach, do you plan to continue the research?
Yeah, of course we do. I think we expected those results, but the community wants to know. Everyone that reached out to me personally after they ended the survey, they were like, "Can I know more? Your research sounds so cool." People, we underestimate this topic, and people do want to know more. And once they know a little bit, they are so interested. So we want to give that opportunity to the community.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so Kiara, go ahead.
Hi, very interesting topic. I had a question. Is there currently any research that you found that is similar to what you're doing?
So on our reference, on our literary revision, we came across an article talking about methanogens, which they were tested, as a matter of fact, to be tested on the environments of Enceladus. And yes, it is proving they can survive. That's one of an example of one of these studies. Another study was on tardigrades that I forgot which mission was it, but I believe it was the European Space Agency that they sent tardigrades into the vacuum of space. And surprisingly, after 12 days being in the vacuum of space, they all survived. The one caveat of that experiment was the radiation of the sun is what ended up killing them, if I'm not mistaken.
And I wanted to add that there was another article that we read, and it was an investigation about how was Enceladus, like actually digging on Enceladus, but we wanted to compare Earth with Enceladus and these microorganisms. Like we did something different. We combined all of them, and we did something different.
Excellent. Okay, so we have another question on the chat from Daniela. Daniela is asking, did you found any other information on other living organisms on Enceladus?
Well, thank you, Daniela, for your question. I think my teammates already answered that question a little bit, but I wanted to add that the information was extremely limited, especially the life on Enceladus. So what we had to do is gather the information of microorganism life in space in general and microorganism life in Earth, then what is the Enceladus conditions, and we had to gather all that up to had estimated of how probable was life on Enceladus.
Exactly. We don't have rovers or anything like that. We haven't made a mission over there, so we don't know. We're just the data is from from Cassini, so we don't have so much information. So we did our best with the limited information we had.
Excellent response. And at the same time, that justifies why your project is relevant. Why is it important to research in this field? If there's little data, it means that it is something new that you're contributing to science. So excellent. I also have one question. Well, originally I had two questions, but Viviana presented the first one that I had about why you chose those three specific experiment files. And then the next question is, your conclusions are that the methane ice worms and the tardigrades have the necessary conditions to survive on Enceladus. Which one do you think that is more likely to survive in such an environment, and why?
Personally, I think the methane I think for me is methane ice because there is methane ice on Enceladus, so they live in those inside the ice. So I think they will probably survive more. But I think Lucas would take tardigrades because he studied tardigrades. So I think Lucas can give you a better.
The reason mostly the reason I picked tardigrades is because of they use a survival instinct method in which they basically freeze their entire metabolic processes and they use as little energy sources as possible. That's the main reason I picked it. So they're eventually going to have to get something there. I believe there is energy sources on Enceladus that could help tardigrades, but for me, it could go either way. I don't mind which one would be there. I just hope something's there.
Excellent, excellent. What will be the next step in your project?
Well, the next step is like hopefully gather more data. We are very limited, as we already said, but because we started making this initiative and telling people about Enceladus, we hope more people become aware, and this gets to the space station or NASA or someone that works there and can help us gather more data and continue this experiment. Of course, we would like to go to Enceladus and take those microorganisms and see if they could actually survive. But I think we have to give time for that. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. I will also love to go to Enceladus. Excellent presentation, team. All right, so we're going to continue with the next and last presentation for the day. So now we have the project title, Comparison of Calendars of Ancient Civilizations from an Arqueoastronomy Perspective, with the students Ana Morales, Ariana Hernandez, Erielis Vázquez, Joania Rivera, Sofía Rosendo, and Tiffany Padilla. So whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can't see it full screen yet. We can see the PowerPoint document per se. Perfect, now we see it full screen.
Good morning, we are Group 5 and we are going to be presenting our investigation, which is the comparison of calendars of ancient civilizations from an archaeoastronomy perspective. My name is Ariana Hernandez and my partners are Joania Rivera, Ana Morales, Tiffany Padilla, Erielis Vázquez, and Sofía Rosendo, which is going to be starting up with our first topic.
Thank you, Ariana. Now, what is archaeoastronomy? Arqueoastronomy is a study on how ancient civilizations use astronomy to complete their everyday tasks. It is divided into 3 fields of study, this being archaeology, anthropology, and astronomy. Each of these branches help researchers understand how these past cultures progressed, how did they behave, and most importantly, how they saw the sky, including who they worshipped and in what they believed in. Each of these civilizations used astronomy for navigation, agriculture, ceremonies, and timekeeping. Archaeoastronomy also helps us study certain similarities and differences between each of these civilizations.
The key concept of this investigation was to compare and contrast each of the Mesoamerican cultures, which are Mayas, Aztecs, Incas, and Chibchas, with the Tainos, which led us to the question, how is Taino astronomy similar to other Mesoamerican cultures?
Our research was based on how did the Taino use the calendars, what patterns did they use, and finally, what were some of their differences or similarities. Now with Erielis Vázquez.
Okay, starting with cultures and calendars, the Taino. The Taino inhabited the insular Caribbean, composed by Jamaica, Virgin Islands, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and of course, Puerto Rico. Established in ceremonial plazas called batey, being their most important settlements, were commonly rectangular stone-lined places where they conducted their ceremonial dances called arrillado, ball game batu, and for their astronomical observations. A thing important to mention is that these were aligned with the sun. On the picture above, you have an example of Plaza Tibes in Ponce, where it can be seen that they portray the shape of a sun on the floor. This makes evident the astronomical knowledge they had, using it to their advantage in daily tasks like agriculture, orientation, along with others. The Taino calendar. The Taino calendar was classified as a lunar, divided in 4 sections and areas. It was found in the Antilles. This is an image of the calendar where the dots located on the areas of the age represent the months and the ones inside the days. For example, in the first area, you have these 4 dots, 4 months with 70 days because of the dots inside. Summing and multiplying that up, it gives us to 19 months with 360 days. This calendar ends in the winter solstice with the 5 extra days. These were for the celebration of ceremonies like the birth of the sun, giving us a total of 365 composing the year. A dot encrusted in one of the division lines means that they counted an additional day every 4 years, referring to what is today called the leap year with February.
Imagine we're really advanced in astronomy. Their origin is in Yucatan around 2600 BC. They use observatories, shadow casting devices, and observations of the horizon to trace the motions of the sun, stars, and planets. They viewed the skies as gods, and they had 4 circular calendars, starting with the calendaric wheel or calendar round, and the long count calendar, which is important to note that it ended in the winter solstice in December 21st, 2012. The AB is one of the most important. The AB is a solar calendar that ends and starts around the summer solstice, around the month that would be Pup. In the Gregorian calendar that we June 26th, it has 19 months, each with 20 days, starting in 0 and then in 19, except for the last month, that's Uwajeb. This has 5 religious days. Every 4 years, a day was added to Wajeb. It has a total of 365 days, and it has a hieroglyph system, and it's, as I mentioned, a solar calendar. And finally, the Solskin is a religious calendar that focuses on human energies. It had 260 days, which are related to the 9 months of human gestation and 9 moon cycles. This calendar also has a hieroglyph system.
The Incas. The Incas lived across western South America to what is today Quito in the north to Santiago in the south, and originated in Pacritampu, but had their first settlement in Cusco. To the Incas, astronomy was crucially important as it was their main economic support for their agriculture. It is believed that this is why the Incas gave each and every constellation and star a purpose. They also built Machu Picchu, as seen in this picture here, according to the sun, and their streets were constructed to imitate the constellations. The Incas' calendar ends and starts with the winter solstice in approximately December. Their calendar is solar. This calendar is composed of 12 months and 365 days, which meant that this culture had the knowledge that the Earth took a little more than 365 days to finish its orbit around the sun every 4 years. This did not imply that they knew the Earth orbits the sun, but rather that they had an idea related to what actually happens. In total, the Inca had 5 religious days at the end of the year that were called Waiip, which took place around a solstice and were considered very unlucky to them. They also had a hieroglyphs writing system.
Although each of these civilizations have a certain origin, the Aztecs do not. They were a nomadic tribe of the northern Mexico plateau before their appearance in Mesoamerica. And unlike other civilizations, the Aztecs considered the possibility that the world could be destroyed and recreated at the end of a 52-year cycle. They were also concerned about a lack of stability that the sky had and the damage that it could form. With the combination of the 2 calendars, solar and lunar, allowed them to pinpoint the main phases in their economic life. The first calendar is the Siopawadi, which starts and ends in the spring equinox in March. It's a lunar calendar with a circular shape and 19 months and 365 days a year. It has a hieroglyph system, and according to the Aztecs, if gods did not have their individual days, the universe would become unbalanced and end. Therefore, they have 5 religious days. Now, the Tonalpawadi. It is a religious calendar, and much is unknown about this one. What we do know is that it starts And we don't know when it starts and ends, but what we do know is that it has 20 months and 260 days a year with a hieroglyph system and a circle shape.
The Chiclas or Muiscas were Native Americans that lived in modern-day Colombia near Bogota and Tunja. In terms of religion, they idolized and worshipped the sun, and gave offerings in sites such as caves because they believed these were portals to other worlds. They were very politically centered until this was crushed in the 16th century. Chibcha calendar. The calendar started in January and was mainly used for agricultural, time, and religious purposes. They had 3 types of years, but the main one was 360 days long, with 12 months composed of 30 days. Each month was made of 10 weeks, with each week being 3 days long.
The analysis and discussion. The 5 days. As you may have noted, the ending of a few calendars with this commonly religious 5 days, appearing in the Mayan Hab, as the Suapuali, the Inca, and the Taino. Depending on each culture, was the form they represented it, either in a month like the Mayas or just adding the extra like the Tainos. On the picture above, you have a hieroglyph taken out from the Mayan calendar app. It is the month called Wayeb, and it is represent these 5 mentioned days. Because they were the ending of the year, it occurred on solstice or equinoxes. The Taino ended in the winter solstice like the Incas, noting that similarity they had on that. On the other hand, the Aztecs ended them on spring equinoxes. They also gave them different meanings. For the Tainos were a mode of celebration. Unlike them, the Mayas and Aztecs considered them very unlucky days. The reservation of these days gives us an idea of how important the beliefs were for them, separating these days to express them.
Lunar and solar calendars. The Tainos and Siapuali had a lunar calendar, while the Hab and Maya had a solar calendar. The Chibcha, in contrast, had an exception and had a solar as well as lunar calendar and counted their days using the sun and their months with the moon. The Tainos calendar was marked by important events that are related to the sun, such as the winter solstice and spring equinox. This later to be later classified both as lunar and solar.
The calendars that do not have much in common with the Taino are the Tzolk'in, a Mayan calendar, and the Tonalpohualli, an Aztec calendar. Since the Taino was not as religiously connected as these two were, for them it was more functional. Now, the Muisca calendar, which is a Chibcha calendar, differs from the Taino in terms that it is divided into 3 calendars based on social status.
Structure. All calendars had a circular shape, no matter if Mesoamerican or Caribbean. However, the Taino calendar used dots instead of hieroglyphs. This difference might be in terms of functionality or made it easier for common people to use, which in turn made it more accessible.
As mentioned before, the Tainos observed the sky and used it to their advantage. They planted their crops depending on the lunar phase, therefore they needed a calendar. An example of this can be that they kept record on the good and bad days to plant depending on the lunar phase, as well as hurricane seasons. In addition, ceramics were often made after the new moon. It is important to remember that the calendar represents the importance the Tainos gave to the study of the moon. And an interesting fact can be that they had certain structures like Cave Casibajagua, which is located in Dominican Republic, and plazas, also called bateys, that were aligned with these astronomical events.
In conclusion, the Tainos did use a calendar to track time. This had 19 months with a total of 365 days and an additional day every 4 years. It was governed by astronomical events such as the winter solstice and spring equinox, events that are of the sun. Many similarities were found in the Taino Mesoamerican calendars. These were especially in the Incan, Maya, and Aztec calendars. These were as 5 religious days at the end of their year, finishing their year with astronomical events, circular shape, same amount of months and days. These conclusions led us to 2 possible situations. 1, the Mesoamerican cultures had contact with the Tainos. This could be either by trading or migrations, led them to trace these ideas and knowledges. Or two, the Taínos' observations went beyond to just looking at the sky, leading them to make these critical observations, have more knowledge, and use them for their advantage, to use it for agriculture or other practical things. This extensive research led us to future possible researches, such as the importance of the winter solstice in the Taino culture, because this is seen in many plazas, caves, and in the calendar. The other one is, what is the relevance of the number 4 in the mythology of the Mesoamerican cultures? It is really evident in the all of those religions that the number 4 has an impact on those cultures. It can be seen also in the calendars. As an example, in the Taino calendars, that is divided in 4 sections, the months and the days. These are our references.
Thank you so much for your attention and the Star Academy for this opportunity. Any questions?
Perfect, excellent presentation. So first of all, let me go, there's a comment on the YouTube live from May, who is saying she's saying, emocionada al ver tantos jóvenes comprometidos, les auguro mucho éxito, en especial a Arielis Vázquez Tomei. Excellent, so let's continue now with the questions. Let's see, Jorge, go ahead.
Yes, well, first of all, it was an amazing presentation. It was, I really liked it. My question is, which Mesoamerican civilization is the most similar to the Taínos? Why? And do you guys think this means that they were related, or maybe their ancestors were related in some way?
Well, as you may have noted, we can tell you a specific civilization that is the most similar to the Taino, because they all have something in common. What is the less commonly civilization are the Chibchas, because of the way they divided their calendars in 3. And what is the other part of the question? Sorry, I didn't catch the last part.
My other question was like, do you maybe the most similar one, maybe the one that was most similar one means that they were maybe, or their ancestors were related in some way?
Yes, in the research, in the center research we made, I found out that there is this possibility that the caciques communicated with each other for the Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, called Española in that time. So yes, it exists the possibility that they were related, they were blood related. Any other question?
Adding to what Arieli said, it could be also said that the Mayan culture could be the most common with the Taino, because they had the most things in common, as the 19 months, the 5 religious days, the ending in a solstice, and they also had an extra day every 4 years, which could mean that they could be related. That is another possible question we were discussing, our team, that we could look for later on. If there's a possibility that the Mayan and Taino cultures are related in history.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Excellent. So we have some other comments from the YouTube live. So we have Yanixa Muniz, who is saying very interesting topic and excellent presentation. Y tenemos también a Abel Padilla, who is saying interesting presentation, very detail oriented. Definitely our ancestors were more advanced than expected. Okay, so let's go with some questions from Mr. Christian. Okay, he has 2 questions. The first one, is it possible to study the Taino Arqueoastronomy without focusing on the religious aspects?
Well, we had an conference with El Señor Pérez. He's a professor at the UPR, and he taught us that it is possible to study them without the religious aspect, because some historians have have the misconception that because some other civilizations were polytheist, well, the Tainos have to be too. But it cannot be either proven, but you can jump to the conclusion that they have certain aspects that do not go with the religious terms. And it is more with the sun and the moon, but not with, oh my God, not with gods.
Okay, so it was more related to the objects that they could perceive, right?
Yes. An example can be Cave Casibajawa, because they believe that with a certain period of time, the sun and the moon originated from there, which were some of their beliefs.
Excellent. And we have another question from Christian. He says, if you find evidence of past intelligent life on other planets, what will be the first tool of archaeoastronomy that you would use to study their perspective of the universe?
Can you repeat the question?
If you find evidence of past intelligent life on other planets, what will be the first tool of archaeoastronomy that you would use to study their perspective of the universe? Or how would you approach studying their perspective of the universe?
I think their location would be a very important part to play in this investigation, specifically because where they were settled could mean what they believed in, their religions, and pretty much their culture and everything there is to know about them.
So Ariana, are you saying that what they're going to be able to visually perceive is going to influence their belief system?
Yeah, because most of the cultures that we have studied were exactly like that. What they saw, just as Sophia explained with the cave, they saw and they thought that the sun would come and appear and will leave from that specific location, which really proves that their beliefs were based on where they settled down.
Excellent.
An example to that is that since these cultures are located in Central America, they're like kind of the same location. So they see these events, solar events such as the solstice, very similar because of their location is close to tropical zone. Compared if they were more in, let's say, Canada, it wouldn't be the same, you know.
Excellent. So we have a comment from Félix Acevedo. Dice, excelente presentación. Mucho éxito a todos, en especial a Arielis Vázquez. Okay, and let's continue now with the questions. So we have one from Alana, and this is related to one of the questions that I was going to present later on. So Alana is saying, could you talk more about what you found relating to the Chicha calendars? I found interesting that they had multiple calendars. And following that same line of the same question, right? So you mentioned that their calendars had a religious foundation. They were less similar to the Taínos, but you also mentioned that they had different categories. I recall correctly, different versions by social classes. How did this work? How would this establish?
Well, they had 3 calendars. They had 3 calendars that had 3 types of years. For example, they had the rural year that was made of 12 months. These were lunar, all of them are lunar cycles with around 360 days. And then the Sumcam or common made of 20 months with around 600 days. And the sacred that was used by Christ was made out of 37 months, around 1,110 days. I forgot to mention that the Sumken was used for common people, and the rural year was for agricultures in the mountains. So they divided the years depending on their social status. If you were a priest, for example, you would use the sacred calendar. If you were a normal citizen, you would use the Sumken, and so goes on.
Excellent, excellent. Andrea, I believe that you have a question.
I do, thank you. My question for you guys is, by the way, excellent presentation. My question is, you mentioned that, well, the stars had, and then these planetary bodies had a impact in their cultural lives and their religious lives. Did these ever have an impact on their educational, like every day? You know, did they ever try to study them, or did they just? I don't know if you understand my question.
I think what you're trying to say is that if what we're studying right now based on the religion and calendars also affected what they studied, like, is that it?
Study these, or were they just used in their cultural lives for agriculture, for work?
Well,
did they ever try to study them?
We did mention that many of them were looked at them as religious aspects. So I think in order to have something added to your religion, you'd have to study it, even if it's not from a point of thinking that you're a professional at the field. It's something unknown for them, and they did study it as part of to see ways to include them into their cultures, which is what they did at the end of the day.
Also, adding to what Ariana said, to do this calendar, you need to study a lot of these astronomical events, to do these observations and count the days and the months and all that. So yeah, they study.
Adding to what my partner said, yes, you could basically consider that as an education because it was passed from each past culture to each of the other newer generations that would come. And as you said, agriculture is one of the biggest ones, but it could be said that as well, we can interpret that they had other things as well that they could pass down and could be acquired as knowledge.
Yeah, and in addition, they also needed to study them because, as mentioned, they used it for navigation too, and so that they could navigate, they had to learn certain patterns, what now we call constellations. Well, they had to learn them and study them so that they could know where they were going. And in addition, they also studied them to learn what was around them, so they could understand everything.
An interesting aspect too, that they used this knowledge not only for agriculture, but also to know their season. Because as you guys know, we live in an island that hurricanes and tropical storms pass by depending on the month that we're in. So thanks to those astronomical knowledge, they were able to know when was the hurricane season coming, and they were able to prepare for it.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so then I have one last question. So archaeoastronomy is definitely a super interesting field, right? But we know that it is not part of our education system's curriculum. And here come my two questions. You think that this topic should be part of our school's essential curriculum? And what made you interested in this topic? Why do you think it's relevant?
I think, oh, sorry. I think it must be added to the school curriculum because people here and other parts of the world have this common misconception that Tainos were less than compared to other Asian cultures. And that leads to the belief that we're less than other cultures when we actually have the same ancient knowledge. And it just makes prejudice against us. So I think it should be added. And your other question was about the importance of it. Well, the importance of it, I think, yeah, it is relevant. Past cultures, learning about your ancestors really shines a light on how your culture is today. Tainos, even if they were exterminated a lot by the Spaniards, it's important to learn about them because many aspects of their culture affects us today.
And adding to what Anna said, something very important when we were looking at it as like from the perspective of a modern world, everybody loves astronomy personally, I think, because everybody I talk to talks to me about astronomy and they're very interested. And I know a lot of people that don't really love history that much. And I think adding this mix of astronomy with history, and it would really help a lot of people to learn better and to be more interested in history, which I think is very important.
Yeah, and in addition to what Ariana said, I believe that it is important because when we were researching, we did not have many information because there are not many experts in the area. And well, forming this research can help and contribute to those persons that do not find this topic really relevant, and then we can continue on our research and learn more about our ancestors, because as Anna said, people believe that history is not important and that our ancestors are not important, but they are, because thanks to them, they really inspire certain people to continue on what is astronomy now. And well, there are certain monuments that inspired people to study astronomy.
Yes, also while adding to what Anna said, it's evident they influence us today because, for example, my grandfather always tell me, "Oh no, we can plant this because we have to wait until this lunar phase to give the better product." So that comes, believe it or not, from the Taínos, seeing that lunar phases and planted, for example, this time the calendar.
And
excellent response. Go ahead, Tiffany. I'm sorry.
One of the main reasons why we chose this research project was because it's not a very known subject or topic. It's right now not being studied as much as it should be. And we basically chose it because we thought that by us talking and introducing it again into society, that more people become aware of this lack of information that is crucial and important for our knowledge, and that they'll be inspired to continue the research.
Yeah, and as mentioned before, I am going to repeat you that it is important because when we were when we had the conference with Senor Perez, he taught us that he has other teammates or companions that study the field, but in different perspectives. So it is interesting to see how certain historians can research the same topic, but in different perspective, and what can they add to that topic so that it can become more interesting.
Excellent. I think that those different perspectives also feed the flow of knowledge, right? So approaching the same problem from different perspectives is going to lead to different pieces of information that are in the end going to provide more knowledge on a specific topic, right? So I totally agree with everything that you presented so far, and it is also very important to remember, right, that the social structures that we have today are heavily influenced by the way that we perceive ourselves as Taínos, right? So how was our culture, and this perspective that sometimes happens and spurs from some of the people from our island that were less, comes from this belief system that Taínos were, in a sense, people that didn't have a structured civilization, right? So they have a random system of beliefs and so on, but that is certainly not true. And you can actually clarify those misconceptions through the study of archaeoastronomy. And I think that that's one of the main takeaways from your presentation, and one of the main aspects that we need to remember, and that justifies the validity and the importance of your work. So thank you for that. Let's see if we have any other questions. Okay, Christian is asking, what will be the next step for this project, and how can other students join or continue this project that you started here?
I know that a next step would definitely be, I think for us, very important, contact more people that can actually study this, you know, from a scientist perspective, because we are in school, we're not yet como que professionals. And it would be to contact those people so that maybe we could actually start studying Tainos more in depth, because as Tiffany said, our experiment is definitely one that it's very important and unique because there is not much on the Taino culture, and I think it would be very important to do so. And also, when we started this project, we also had in mind to start going maybe to schools, and at least I know in my school we can do workshops and everything to the students themselves. So we'd like to go there maybe and expand to other schools because we want to expand our knowledge and maybe encourage more people to study this and even join us, like you said right now.
Excellent, Ariana. Well, with this, we're going to conclude our presentations for the day. So we're going to be ending the live stream. Thank you for those of you who joined us through YouTube Live and those of you who presented today here on our Zoom meeting.